because I can't do this high technology stuff.
Where did you hear that, Alan?
I've heard that before. Are people still entering, Tony?
Yes, they are.
Okay. I'll wait a little bit.
You may want to go ahead and start now.
All right, sounds good. Well, hello, everybody. My name is Alan Beck. I am the chair of the Danforth Staff Council, and on behalf of myself and the entire Staff Council, I'd like to welcome you all to our fall town hall. I want to send a special thanks to our Danforth Staff Council Communication Committee and Tony Phillips from IT's Media Services for helping to make this town hall happen. Couldn't have done it without them. I wanted to keep this slide in the images, or this image in the slide here, for a couple of reasons. Number one, this photo was taken from Hillman Hall, where I work in the Prevention Research Center. And two, we really have a beautiful campus, and I want to remind all of you of that are working remotely, that it is quite beautiful. And we miss seeing all of our coworkers and miss seeing the campus, especially this time of year when it's just unbelievably beautiful. For those that don't know, the Staff Council has 30 members with 9 committees, and our mission is to serve and represent non-faculty and non-union Danforth staff members. We collaborate with senior administration and HR on matters that directly impact staff. The Staff Council's goals are to seek out issues, interests, and ideas with participation from the staff to provide two-way communication between senior administration and staff to provide input on issues that directly impact the staff. And here are some of our members. And if you are a DSC member and don't see your photo on this page, please send me a photo so we can post it to our website. Some things we're working on right now, just as a brief intro. The Staff Council created an ad hoc committee to look at how the university has responded to COVID-19, and we recently submitted our response document to those folks. It was essentially looking at what went well, what did not go well, as well as some suggested solutions from the viewpoint of the everyday staff perspective. Prior to COVID, the Staff Council created an ad hoc committee to look at creating values for WashU. Our next step in that process is to get input from the staff members here at WashU. So be on the lookout for that. We were trying to figure out how to engage with staff and support one another in a virtual environment. I know many of us miss seeing our coworkers regularly and being on campus, especially myself. Like, speaking for myself, it's kind of rough because my new coworkers are my 3 sons, a 4-year-old, 2-year-old, and 2-month-old. So it's kind of rough. We recently provided some input for Hank's successor. He'll talk more about his new position because we, as the Staff Council and staff members, work closely with that position. And then finally, based off of Staff Council goals, we are looking to better communicate with staff members. And there are 2 things I plan to implement. One is a newsletter to staff to communicate what we as the Staff Council are working on your behalf, as well as a chat with a chair where I plan to have staff meet with myself and my co-chair Kelly in a virtual environment whereby you can express any issues or successes that we as a Staff Council should be aware of and can work on if we need to. Plan to limit these to pretty small and short meetings. They will not be recorded. Anything spoken to us will be considered confidential. We have 4 speakers lined up for you today. Hank Weber will be talking about his new position and fall updates. Legail Chandler will talk about some HR updates. Nicole Hudson, who's a very busy woman right now, is going to talk to us about campus initiatives related to structural racism. And last but not least, Jamie Kolker to talk about changes to the campus spaces. And each one of these speakers will be introduced prior to their session. If you have questions for the speakers, you can insert your questions into the Q&A feature. And you can also email questions to staffcouncil@wusl.edu. Thank you for attending. On behalf of all the staff council members, we appreciate your time. I will now pass it over to Kelly Wiese-Niemeyer, the staff council's co-chair, to introduce the first speaker. Thanks.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. So as Alan said, I'm the co-chair of the Staff Council, and I'm welcoming you all here and going to introduce our speakers today. So first off, we will hear from Hank Weber. Hank was named the university's first executive vice chancellor for civic affairs and strategic planning in August. But as you probably know, Hank is not new to the university. He has been here with us as executive vice chancellor and chief administrative officer since 2008. In this role, Hank has overseen a variety of administrative and external affairs functions. Some of them are on and off campus real estate and facilities, human resources, university operations, public affairs, which is my department, information technology, among others. With a combined operating and capital budget of more than $500 million annually and more than 1,600 university staff and contractor employees. He has also chaired the university's administrative cabinet. Among the big accomplishments, which you're all aware of lately, Weber led the East End project, the Danforth campus's largest ever, and has completed over $2 billion worth of capital projects during his time here. He also contributed to the revitalization of the Forest Park Southeast neighborhood and growth of the university's public school support programs. And he has led sustainability programs, under which WashU has added 6 million square feet of space while still reducing energy use and greenhouse gas emissions. He co-led the annual budgeting process and has championed creation of the Academy for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And he has also played a key role in development of the Cortex District, which is a 200-acre urban technology redevelopment effort with more than 6,200 jobs and 425 different companies today. In his new role, Weber will lead a university-wide effort to strengthen the university's role as a teaching, research, and patient care leader and make the St. Louis region stronger and more equitable. The effort is designed to implement Chancellor Martin's vision of transforming Washington University in St. Louis to Washington University for St. Louis. And he'll tell you more about that in just a moment. On the academic side of things, Hank is a professor of practice at the Brown School and the Sam Fox School, and he has taught courses in American public policy, community development, American cities, and sustainable urbanism. We're going to give all of you a little fun fact about our speakers for today. The fun fact about Hank is that his goal in life has been and remains to be center fielder for the Boston Red Sox. Take it away, Hank.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And you know, it's very difficult when a lack of ability makes it impossible to achieve your goals. Hey, HR convinces us that we can stretch the rubber band of ourselves a great deal. But Legail, I have to tell you, I could not stretch enough to hit a curveball. That was until I was 12, I was on a good path, but the curveball ended my aspirations. I still believe it's a physical impossibility. If you have a particular training program that can help me over that, please let me know privately. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. As Kelly nicely introduced, I am in the process of transitioning to becoming the Executive Vice Chancellor for Civic Affairs in St. Louis, really focusing on a set of planning activities for the university, but on our role in making the region stronger. We are, you know, St. Louis is a city of considerable size and influence. We're 2.8 million people in the region, but we are a very large influence on that region. And the question is, how can we act in ways that maximize our interest and the interests of the region? Focusing particularly on inclusive economic development, on community engagement, and partnerships with our neighbors and civic and community leaders. We'll only make progress on the issues of growth and equity, issues that we're all aware of St. Louis's strengths, and we're all aware of St. Louis's weaknesses if we work together. And a lot of my work in the next year or two will be to lead a process of figuring out how, building off a very strong base of programs and activities in the region, we can do even more. Next slide, please. So this is a little bit of my responsibilities before, and Kelly has to put up with the fact that the police department is in the before and after category. There's quite a bit of overlap, but there's also some, I will no longer be doing this at the level of administrative leadership I provided on information technology, on human resources, for example, but I will be providing a little more leadership on some of the areas, a little more leadership on some of the areas, such as the Gephardt Institute and University College. Next, please. Just a little bit in terms of timing, a search committee has been formed to identify candidates for the chief administrative officer role. The start date for that is to be determined. Could be as early as the beginning of 2021. I don't believe it will be later than mid-2021. And I will continue to be responsible for much of my previous portfolio, although not IT, which will be under an interim chief information officer reporting directly to the chancellor. Next, please. Next, please. So let me turn from me to something that has involved thousands of us, all of us to some extent, but has been an all-consuming activity for literally thousands of members of the university community. And that has been preparing for this fall, which has been a fall like no other. Universities, or at least universities like Washington University, are carefully calibrated machines that are designed to encourage and maximize in-person interaction. Interaction between students and students, between faculty and faculty, between staff and staff, and between all of these people and the other groups. We're a community of people. Our spaces are set up this way. Our travel patterns are set up this way. The original plan of the campus with its large green spaces for big gatherings and small green spaces for small gatherings. Jamie Kolker, who you hear later, could talk about this for weeks, about the intricate design of buildings like Hillman Hall, where you have to get from almost anywhere to anywhere. You have to walk through the Clark Fox Forum. We're a machine to maximize interaction, except COVID said we're not supposed to maximize interaction. We're supposed to minimize interaction. And this has meant changing how we work, changing where we work, changing the number of us that are on campus. So far, this has gone better than I think any of us would have expected. Our case numbers are relatively low. You can look on our dashboard on a daily basis, but it continues to be a very significant risk. And the best way to manage that risk is to reduce the number of people on campus. We have dramatically fewer students living on campus, all of them in single rooms, and dramatically fewer staff. And most of our courses, most of our students are taking most of their courses in a virtual environment. We're cautiously optimistic about the university's financial situation, but we remain cautious due to significant expenses to keep our campuses safely open and a number of unknowns. We'll know a lot more about it over the next 3-4 weeks. And we've begun planning for the spring semester. The bottom line is, while there are no final decisions, most of what we read and most of the decisions of our peers suggest that the spring will be more like the fall than like a normal semester. Next slide, please. Just a sense of the timing. Fall planning took place May through July. Fall implementation has been ongoing. We announced our plan in July. The Brown and law schools were the only schools that started on the normal schedule, which was August 24th. We delayed the start of classes and move-in by about 3 weeks. That turned out to be an enormously good thing because we learned a lot from other institutions who came before us. In a sharp change from traditional, we will see final exams, except in Brown and Law, will be the first week in January. So rather than ending up in December, a week or two before Christmas, we will be ending up in January. Next slide. We have taken an extraordinary set of measures, and I'd like to thank all of you who are involved in this to keep our campus safe. We've required training and a pledge for students, faculty, and staff. We've increased occupational resources for occupational health to ensure sufficient support for both campuses. We have required that each of our schools and each of our units think very carefully about who has to be on campus and for how much. The basic idea is if you do not have to be here, you should not be here. Diagnostic testing is available to all students, faculty, and staff who develop symptoms, and we're doing ongoing surveillance testing for undergraduates and tested all of our students when they returned. The evidence from across the country suggests that the highest risk group is undergraduates because of congregate living and because of some of the activities that they're engaged in. So that's the only group that we believe it is cost effective to do surveillance testing. Flu shots are required for faculty, staff, and students who are going to be on site for any period of time, and a variety of other measures. Next. So Jamie is going to provide far more detail about the physical changes on our beautiful campus that we made for this fall. But let me just summarize a few of them. We only have 2,600 undergraduates living on campus. We normally have over 4,000. And that's because we've required all rooms to be singles, and we've taken a number of rooms offline for isolation and surveillance housing. We've refigured classrooms to meet the 6-foot social distancing. We've improved greatly classroom technology. We've reconfigured dining services spaces. We've added 1,200 study cubbies and large temporary tents. If you haven't been on campus, you need to come see the cubbies. These are basically private workstations for people to work in. We've increased outdoor seating options. We've modified cleaning protocols, and we've increased dramatically the inventory of PPE and other necessary supplies. Next. As I mentioned earlier, the decision to start the fall semester, a decision made by the chancellor, later than most of our peers, gave us a time we needed to prepare and plan and to learn from them. All in all, my view is that adjusting to remote work and alternative operations has gone relatively well at the cost of an enormous effort, and with full recognition that particularly that while some people have found it liberating to work at home, more flexible, other people, particularly those with small children, have found it extremely difficult. The group that has found it most difficult are those whose childcare arrangements have been significantly affected. Alan, I don't know how you do it with a 2-month-old, a 4-year-old, and a 2-year-old. We have had, compared to most of our peers, a small number of active cases and positive test results. We attribute that to a mixture of reduced density, good planning, good adherence to public health and safety requirements, and some good luck. These super spreader events that have occurred other places, there is some element of good luck. Unfortunately, we think it's going to get harder. We have benefited, as is true for many years, of a lovely fall in St. Louis. It's our nicest season. And that's encouraged people to be outside, to be able to get a break, to have conversations masked outdoors. It's going to be harder in the fall and winter. We're worried. Every institution in a colder climate is worried. Next, please. In order to help, and I know Legail will mention some of this in more detail, HR is heavily invested in its child and family care benefits and resources. Now have 30 days eligible of days of backup care rather than 15. Sitter and nanny service referrals. HR is in the process of recruiting a child care and family care facilitator to assist faculty and staff. And in the meanwhile, Sarah Wright's been doing that. And we put together a new, or Legail team put together a new flexible work arrangements policy that was designed to create as much possible. Next. So there's a set of useful numbers if you have COVID-19 symptoms, etc. If you either are positive or know someone, there's a set of procedures you must follow. Next. Next slide, please. There is the website, Wash You Together COVID-19 Response, includes all of this information and includes our dashboard of the number of cases we have had and the number of active cases. It is updated every Monday and Thursday. Next, please. And I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Thanks, Hank. We have one in the chat here that I will bring up to you. Speaking about your new position, this person said, not that this new position isn't important, but why is this happening, as well as other high-level hires, when many other positions are frozen, retirement contributions are frozen, and staff aren't receiving raises?
Look, it is inevitably true that the university has taken a variety of steps to cut back. Those have included the hiring freeze. Those have included the retirement contributions. I'm hoping that we're moving to the end of both of those, but we're not there yet. And none of us received raises in this period. At the same time, there are a small number of very high priorities, which the chancellor has made the decision to go ahead with. And this was one of those priorities. It should be noted, however, that until there is a new executive vice chancellor for administration, there is no increase in headcount. And so it is true that there has been an announcement, but there is not an additional executive vice chancellor at this time. Second, can someone explain the dashboard more clearly and how the 2-week testing works? I will do the 2-week testing and I will turn to Richard Payton, my chief of staff, on the dashboard. All undergraduate students are required every 2 weeks to take a COVID test, to go into the center and to have that done. Richard, do you want to talk about the dashboard?
Sure. So the COVID dashboard is available on the university's COVID website. And as Hank said earlier, it's updated every Monday and Thursday. We were running it for the first few weeks of the semester and just showing entry testing. So this was testing that any Danforth campus student had to do. Once we finished that testing, we essentially froze that data in time because we'd finished entry testing. And the graph that's on there now is showing the ongoing surveillance testing. So on that graph, you'll see the positive test results that we have on a daily basis for surveillance testing and diagnostic testing. So diagnostic testing is test results for anybody who has symptoms and goes to the university's diagnostic testing facility. And the surveillance testing is, at this point, just the undergraduate students who are required to test every 2 weeks.
Question is, are there any plans for furloughs or layoffs in the future? First, I'd like to note that on the date that we, we furloughed about 2,100 people. The majority of those were in the medical school on the order of about 1,300. On the order of 90% of those people returned to work. And the vast majority of those had no loss in pay. The numbers were higher on the Danforth campus and in the CFU. I understand that it was psychologically extremely difficult for many people. I heard from many of you, but the vast majority of people are back at work. And I do not believe, and anyone can correct me, that there are any plans for large-scale furloughs or layoffs going further. There is a small-scale number of layoffs that do occur all the time. More of them are at the medical school due to grants ending than any other reason, sometimes a change in clinical demand. But we perceive no COVID-related, it is our expectation and hope. The disease could go crazy again. I mean, I make no promises, but our current plans include no large-scale furloughs or layoffs.
Another quick question in here. Is WashU working with other local universities to kind of do more of a larger approach, or are we just working within WashU specifically?
I think that actually so there is an important question in the chat about someone in unemployment that would like to address individually. So I will ask the team to look into this individually. I think that actually the COVID response of the St. Louis region, a region that's not good at working collectively. Part of my job is to see how I can contribute to us working collectively. I think in many ways, our response to COVID was the best we've done. If you look at the task force on public health, for example, and the work done between the city and the county, that was work that was led by our medical school, by BJC, by SLU, and by SSM. Alex Garza, for example, who some of you have seen, is a SLU faculty member and an SSM senior officer. But we provided much of the public health expertise. So I think that we all realize, and I hope that we take this as a lesson, we're not going to solve the problems of the fact we're not growing fast enough. We're not going to solve the problems of segregation and of the very large income gaps between whites and African Americans, in particular in this region, unless we work collectively. I mean, one of the things that Cortex is a wonderful example. Cortex is the success that Kelly mentioned earlier. I chair the board, but it's a partnership of UMSL, SLU, BJC, WashU, and the Missouri Botanical Garden. So I think we've actually done well and better in this period, and I hope we can continue that. We're not going to get where we want to get to unless it's collective action.
One more quick question that I saw here in the other chat was, is there a reason why medical campus staff have their bonuses and raises reinstated, but Danforth staff have not? Last one.
Yeah. The medical school took very sharp action much earlier than the Danforth campus did, earlier. And they have responded very quick, and they have responded very quickly. The medical school basically earns revenue every day in clinical activity. The Danforth schools have moved much more slowly. And we are still, I believe, we still haven't yet received full payment for the fall. We acted earlier, that they're in a position, they moved more quickly. They did far more furloughs. They did far more salary reductions than were done on the Danforth campus, but their business has bounced back. I'm hopeful that we are going to be hearing good news on these issues on the Danforth campus. But we need a little bit more time. And as was noted in the letter from Amy Queskin and the chancellor, the medical school did not have the particular problem of a set of auxiliary enterprises. It's good for public health that we have thousands of less students who are living in university housing, but it's not good for the university's finances.
Great, thank you, Hank. Thank you for the presentation and the answers to the questions.
Thank you.
Kelly, want to take it away and introduce the next speaker?
Sure thing. Thanks again for your time, Hank, and your presentation. Next, we
By
will
the
hear.
way, if I saw there was a few questions I didn't get to, if people have questions for me, I'm in the directory, hweber@woostel.edu.
Thanks for that. Next up, we're going to hear from Legail Chandler. If you don't know Legail, she has been the Vice Chancellor for Human Resources here at WashU since February of 2015. She brings more than 42 years of HR experience to that role. The Office of Human Resources serves the university's 15,000 faculty, staff, postdocs, fellows, and employed students. Legail's experience in HR covers all areas, including recruitment, compensation, benefits, employee relations, learning and development, applied leadership, analytics, and diversity and inclusion initiatives. She came to WashU in 1999 to design and build its PeopleSoft implementation, and she is heavily involved now with work toward the implementation of Workday. Her prior HR experience includes 10 years leading the HR office at the School of Medicine here and 16 years in its affiliated healthcare system. She is certified as a senior HR professional, both for the Society of Human Resources Management and the Human Resources Certification Institution. She serves on local childcare boards, and she currently is the board chair for the American Research University's HR Institute. And a fun fact about Legail, when she is not solving HR issues here at WashU, she is an avid fly fisher. And now we'll let her tell us some updates from the world of HR.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. I'm going to try and pull up my screen, and hopefully this will go smoothly. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I know that you would like to hear an update on a couple of key areas where we've had so much change take place and so many challenges occur over the last several months. So I'm going to talk a little bit about where we are with childcare and our efforts to bolster resources, and also talk through some of the changes that have occurred over the last several months with time off. And then I have a couple of smaller topics to hit. So obviously we've heard a lot from all of you who have children at one stage or another, whether they are little bitty and living at home, or they're in school, or they're in college. And this has been an area where we've been working diligently to try and expand both benefits and services to try to support everyone in kind of the new normal, right? Working from home. We've created on the HR website a location for all of our services that we offer, the Child and Family Care Hub. If you have not been out there, I hope you take a moment, go out and just try and familiarize yourself with what all is available. You know, for some time now, we've had 3 locations that actually offer formal early learning. One of those is on North Campus, run by Bright Horizons. One is actually on the Danforth campus and is a nursery with a slightly different model. And then we have a partnership with University City's Child Care Center over on Vernon Avenue, where they have some spots that are dedicated to WashU. I would mention that right now, as we sit here, we have openings at the Child Care Center on North Campus. If you are somebody who's looking to try and place your child in that center, there's a waiting list at the moment. We have about 10 to 12 slots still that we're trying to fill. So you can contact Kelly Jackson there and talk to her about what's available. They cross all the age ranges. So we have also tried to offer other services besides just the sort of center care. One is backup care that's been with us for a while. It's also run by Bright Horizons. And this is really a referral service through Bright Horizons. If you have a need to have childcare, nanny or sitter, or even elder care, someone to stay with an older member of your family, you can contact Bright Horizons and they will arrange to have coverage. We've expanded the number of days per employee that you can request that coverage up to 30 days. And that'll run through the end of the year, and then we'll assess, you know, if we're really utilizing all 30 days for eligible employees or if we need to change that. But this is something that, especially in the case of like an emergency, I need some coverage at the last minute, that is really the niche that this particular thing covers. We expanded beyond just the backup care to try and make people aware that there are actually a number of different referral sources to try and find childcare sitting services or nanny services. So again, Bright Horizons has Sitter City and Nanny Search. Our own EAP provider, Work Life Solutions, can also help families connect to resources in the St. Louis area. And then Child Care Aware is a broader statewide effort, and Accelerate in Illinois. I name, as you can see on the slide there, 2 or 3 others that we are aware of. I will tell you that in a month or so, we're going to be working with a lot of these referral services to try and expand the number of names of people who are interested in doing childcare services. Our role in this would be to try to connect anyone in the WashU community who may be interested in picking up childcare services, would be employed by those registries and could earn money directly through their services. So we're going to try and expand, in other words, our resources by helping them. The other thing that we're doing, and I'm really hopeful that this one is going to pay off big, we've created a position for a child and family care facilitator. This is somebody who really is a direct personal contact you can call. They will help you problem solve. They'll help you try to connect to our benefits. They'll help answer questions. This is somebody who's going to have a focus really on child and family care resources. And I would expect them to also look for other partnerships and ways that we can try and expand the services that we offer in this area. We actually have hired someone now who's going to be starting at the end of the month, and her name is Lisa Eberly Mays. We're going to make a big splash when Lisa gets here and do our best to connect her to as many groups on both campuses and individuals as we can do. So look for a big announcement when Lisa joins us. You know, the thing here that's going on, of course, is that the needs that people have around childcare are broader than just the traditional childcare services that we normally offer. And so we've done our best right now to expand the types of services that we can offer. So things that allow you to keep your child engaged and in an educational mode while they're at home so that you can better focus. We have a number of learning and entertainment tools. We've got virtual sitting services and tutorial services, some of whom use our own WashU students and members of the community, all kinds of activities and games. And we linked up with the Department of Psychiatry to actually offer targeted classes, Zoom classes, one-on-one counseling, articles, and other tips on managing stress, and also managing children right now who are going through their own transition and their own stressful moments, and trying to really just help families, manage through what they're faced with right now. So if this sounds like anything that you could use and you didn't know it was out there, once again, go out on the HR website and look for the Child Care Hub, and you'll see the detailed breakout of services that I'm talking about. The other thing that I want to talk about, it's a different topic, is time off policies, especially, how are we managing absences related to COVID? And our policies have just gotten more complex over time, trying to address various scenarios. It used to be you had sick time and vacation time. And in 2016, we expanded sick time to pick up situations, cover situations where you had not just your own illness, but a family member who was ill. A year or two later, we added caregiver leave, we added short-term medical disability, and all of these policies overlap at times with FMLA leave. And so it's like a puzzle sometimes now, trying to fit various policies together to figure out what covers absences. So when the pandemic struck, we actually invoked a policy that had been written into the university's communicable diseases policy. This policy had been written back when, prior to swine flu, prior to bird flu, and it contained a principle of public health in there, which was if somebody thinks they're sick with a communicable disease, you should let that person stay home and don't put obstacles in their way. Don't worry about time off balances, just pay them and keep them home until you know what you're dealing with. So that principle of really allowing regular pay to be in use if someone had to be sent home either because of quarantine or because of illness due to a pandemic situation, which COVID definitely is, has been a principle for a long time. When we started sending people home, we got the bright idea, quite frankly, that we would refer to the pay during that period that people were home as special pay. It wasn't really an extra bucket. It never was additional days off. It was regular pay under the words or the label special pay so that we could track it and keep it separate from worked time. So we did that for a period of time. It kind of helped us keep track, of when people were home versus not. And in June, we said, the circumstances keep changing. More of us are going to continue to come back to campus. And so we need to revert now to just using our regular pay for COVID-related situations. And so we announced that in June. I think that people heard this, and it was like they got rid of special pay. We got rid of the label, but pay has always been there, and pay would continue to be there under some very specific COVID-related circumstances that you see listed here. So medically directed quarantine, whether it's the employee or a family member. If someone has a diagnosis, again, whether it's an employee or a family member. Regular pay would cover those medically required periods. And then depending on situations or for other situations that are not COVID related, the regular policies we otherwise have, whether they're sick, vacation, short-term medical caregiver or FMLA would apply. So I hope that people understand that we didn't take away extra time off. We changed the label and went back to regular pay. So one area that did change was this issue of childcare responsibility. We allowed the regular pay under the words special pay to cover situations when you were home, your children were home, no one was sick, they were just home because schools were closing. And so we had allowed that initially to sort of float through this, just keep it regular pay, because so much was happening and so many changes so quick. Now, though, school arrangements have matured. Sometimes they're on, sometimes they're off. And we said, you know, we need to now revert to allowing the use of vacation, personal leave, or just simply let people have the ability to flex their work schedule to cover these circumstances, because there's so many patterns and so many things happening with the way schools are managing. So the bottom line is that managers and employees can work together to schedule any work schedule that works for them. You could work early in the morning, not at all during the day, and pick up again at night. You know, anything that allows you to have a better balance between work and family life, to take care of your children and still get your work done. And so we have managed to work out a number of coverage arrangements that help people deal with the childcare responsibilities through this combination and this policy. The other thing I want to mention real quick now, my last two topics, and then I'll see what questions there are. We have announced, hopefully you all saw this, that we've resumed or reopened the Employee Emergency Response Fund, or Crisis Fund, I think it was called the first time. And we're fairly well funded right now to be able to take in a number of requests for reimbursement for specific expenses that people have in emergency related situations. So we're open until the 30th. If you or someone you know is running short of funds, having difficulty making ends meet, or has an unusual circumstance where they've got extra expenses and they don't know what to do, they can apply, contact Sarah Wright, and there is an application to fill out. You can see the types of eligible expenses that are listed there. We will be making quick decisions about where we think we can best apply those funds, and be announcing those who will be able to receive some reimbursement or funds from this emergency fund the first week in November. So this is just to remind everybody, it was announced, but I wanted to call everyone's attention to it. The last thing that I just want to mention really only affects about 1,300 people right now at the Danforth campus. These are all bi-weekly employees, so it may not affect all of you, but we are completing a transition. We actually started a year ago this month to move biweekly employees off of a timesheet and onto web clock, which is part of today's payroll system, part of HRMS. We have to do this. We have to make this change. We're getting ready to implement My Day. Coming up in July 2021, moving people to the web clock is required because we have a web clock and a time clock in My Day, and that's it, just those two options. And we also know that people tend to have much more timely and accurate timekeeping, which of course in the end, this is all about making sure employees are paid for all of the time that they're worked. You can see the dates of transition down there. There's a specific date for arts and sciences. Those people would start on November 1st to use the new system. The rest of the Danforth campus and CFU would start on November 29th. And we have communicated that now to management and to those employees. And we will be sending reminders to them so that they're ready when the dates come. I know that this can be emotional. This can be a situation where people don't always agree or don't feel comfortable We're always happy to talk to anyone who has concerns about how they're tracking time and whether they feel like they're being paid for all their time. So please feel free to call any member of HR, or you can contact me. That's really what I wanted to share today. If you all have questions for me, hopefully we still have a few minutes for those.
Yes, thanks, Legail. I'll ask a few questions that came up in the chat. Similar questions were, will places like the Learning Center and WashU implement an income-based pricing?
Yeah, so we realize the premiums that people pay to have a child in the child care center are noticeable, right? Child care in general is not a cheap arrangement for anybody. And we always check every year to try and make sure that those premiums are reasonably in line with the market, given the level of services that are available in that center. The nursery is a slightly less expensive situation, and the University Child Care Center on Vernon Avenue is a little bit less expensive as well. We have said that we are going to examine issues like that. So I can't tell you today, we know that we're going to put in an income-based approach to those premiums, but we do have it on our list of things that we want Lisa, when she gets here, to begin to do some research and to try to understand, what all would be involved in an approach like that. Taxes and other things can be impacted, so it can get to be a sticky wicket, but we are looking at that as a possibility.
A couple of similar questions. Is web clock going to be required for part-time like student employees?
So this will not affect current student employees. It will once our students arrive for the fall. And the reason being is that we're going to be implementing in July. And once the students, whoever those are, show up in July of 2021 or August of 2021, they'll have to use the web clock at that time in My Day. But there's no point in training our students today to do that.
Okay.
We are leaving them out of it for the moment.
Thanks. Has there been any consideration to giving employees, to allowing them to accrue more than 33 days of vacation time, especially for those who worked and could not take time off during COVID because like other colleagues were furloughed?
Yeah. I would say in maybe the last 2 years, maybe 3, had done a fairly extensive review of our time off policies. That's what resulted in a number of changes like caregiver and other policies coming out. At that time, we raised the balance that you could have for vacation from 22 days to 33 days based on competitive practices that we could see, not just in higher ed, but locally. And we don't foresee changing that limit right now. I'm expecting that cap at 33 days to still stay there. We have at times when management has reached out to talk about specific projects that may be happening. These are usually full-scale projects like My Day or EPIC implementation, or the COVID pandemic created some circumstances at the med school where limited staff had to come in and do more. We have lifted temporarily and allowed people to be paid for time that they would have accrued instead of losing it, but those are usually very restricted circumstances and time limited. So I would just say, if you feel you're in a setting like that and your management wants to talk with us about that, we will always talk with an area about what's happening, but it does have to be time limited and a pretty huge project that's happening.
Another question. So we talked a lot about folks that have children, but what about folks that don't have kids, for example? What's the university doing to support employees' mental health? I know the wellness folks have done quite a bit with that. What else? I mean, can you explain that briefly?
Yes, absolutely. So Human Resources teamed up with faculty in a number of schools, at the medical school, couple of the key departments, psychiatry and general medical sciences, and also in social work, to take a look at this whole question, because I think our faculty especially certainly realized right away what stress and anxiety this whole circumstance would bring. And we're very concerned about caregivers, especially of all ilk, who, you know, are going to be on the front line trying to deal with students or patients. And so from that partnership, we've created a wide range of Zoom opportunities for starters. You can go out on the HR's website and see schedule of current topics that range from, again, you know, parenting situations, but also individual circumstances for stress, anxiety, depression. We have a COVID hotline for caregivers who may be in the moment and are feeling unsupported or stressed or having a crisis of some sort and need to speak to a member of the faculty in psychiatry right away. We were able to provide therapists, behavioral therapists, counselors, as well as psychiatrists on the front line, being able to talk to people. You could set up one-on-one counseling sessions. You can attend group sessions. Our wellness team under Emily Page kicked in. We have a wide range of meditation, yoga, stress relief. There's at least 6 or 7 self-care apps that are out there that are available that help you do everything from time your breaths to, you know, kind of get into the Zen moment, to think about, you know, how you manage not only your own stress, but stress of people around you. They are working right now more diligently on coming up with materials to help supervisors also recognize the signs of stress and anxiety, and not to assess it or figure out how to fix it, but to know what to do if they actually are seeing the signs of stress and anxiety in others. So we've done, I think, quite a bit in this space to make the expertise the institution has immediately available to people when they need it. And we would always encourage, you can talk with one of us in human resources. You can also contact the EAP if you need deeper, longer term advice or guidance on things.
And one more quick question. Is web clock training scheduled already?
So what we have available right now, and that we've distributed to everyone, is a guide. There's a guide for employees, was attached to their announcement, and a guide for managers attached to their announcement. We are going to be doing Zoom sessions here in the next week with managers who want to join us and kind of walk through what their responsibilities are. And then we will be reaching out to the areas that have the bulk of these people, the employees who are transitioning, and working out times to do employee-based training. But we want to do that more locally to set those up and to schedule those. So there will be training coming.
Great, thank you. I'll kind of end the questions there so we can move on to our next speaker. But thank you, Legail, for your time and everything. And just so folks know, we're going to keep track of these questions that we aren't answering, and we'll try to get those answered and send those out as well. So thank you, Legail. Kelly, go ahead and introduce the next person.
Great. Thanks so much for your time, Legail. Next up this afternoon, we are going to hear from Nicole Hudson. Nicole is the Assistant Vice Chancellor of the Academy for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, which was created in 2018. Nicole uses communication, storytelling, and strategy to drive towards system-level change. She's worked on projects in industries ranging from Broadway to government. Her early career was mostly focused on large-scale digital communications for international brands, but her recent focus has been more on the policy and service interventions to address inequities at the organizational, municipal, and population level. Nicole had served as communications director for the Ferguson Commission, and then led the nonprofit that grew out of it, called Forward Through Ferguson, to support the region's implementation of the commission's report. After that, she served for about a year as Deputy Mayor of Racial Equity and Priority Initiatives for the City of St. Louis. And then she joined the administration here at Washington University to be the assistant vice chancellor for the academy. And she'll tell you about those efforts and what we have to see there soon. And just a quick fun fact about Nicole. She shared that because she doesn't have enough on her plate right now, she's raising 4 baby chickens for the first time. So good luck with that project.
Yeah,
Take it away,
thanks.
Nicole.
I'll definitely need it. So good afternoon, and thank you to the Danforth Staff Council for having me, and thanks to all of you for being here today. I was asked to talk about the campus initiatives that exist to address structural racism, and I'm going to start by anchoring us in the charge of the academy, which I know people have varying levels of familiarity with. One of the foundational pieces of moving a community forward is a shared language. So I want to take the time to touch back a bit into the academy's charge, which I think will also set up a conversation about addressing structural racism. So the academy, which was born out of a recommendation from the Diversity and Inclusion Commission's 2017 report, is charged with being the primary vehicle to shift culture and climate on all the university's campuses with a focus on staff and faculty. Many of you have heard me remark what a small task that is. That is a joke. One of the things that we continuously wrestle with at the academy is where to realistically focus on change in a complex and siloed ecosystem where power and decision-making is decentralized at best, and also across multiple campuses and multiple schools. So to that end, we have borrowed from our friends in Olin and think about things along a logic model, really aiming to focus on impact. So if that's our charge, how do we realistically commit to that impact? So our big, hairy, audacious goal, as they say, is to have all WashU staff and faculty fully experience and be a part of actively constructing an inclusive and equitable campus culture and climate from where they are in the institution. So we are an institution, as I mentioned, made up of multiple campuses. We have multiple business models, locations, and schools. We're international. We're by nature hierarchical. We value academic freedom and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there's no top-down, one-size-fits-all approach that will be realistic, because our world does not support an approach that's static. And we have to recognize and accept the nuances in different areas and at different times across the institution will be a moving target. And that's critical to having a successful model. So our work to date has led us to believe that an empowerment model, one that leverages our charge to be that primary vehicle and collaborative partner, is the right model to aim for and push for change and success inside Washington University. So in my brief time, I'm not going to go through all of these terms, but I share this non-exhaustive list just to illustrate and drive home that they're all different terms, and they all have different meanings, and different people interact with them differently and have different experiences. So it's important to be clear which ones we seek to use, and I believe most importantly, not to use any as code. So where we can be specific, we should be. Data can often lead us to where and how we can be specific, and using terms interchangeably can keep us from achieving our goals at all and can keep us stuck. So you'll see here, I have blankism, knowing that it could be racism, it could be sexism, it could be ageism, that there are numerous ways in which inequities show up. Just really briefly, in terms of the academy itself being diversity, equity, and inclusion, we see diversity as representation, so a multiplicity of people and backgrounds, ideas, inclusion as making sure people have a sense of belonging, and then we talk about equity as an outcome. Can you roll the dice? Is it random who has tenure, who's getting promoted, who's graduating? Or if it is random, then we have achieved equity. And if there are disproportionate outcomes, there's an equitable process that needs to be in place. The one that I often see a code for is when we talk about diversity, we immediately go to race, and it is not always about race. And that's where we really like to back into this idea of being broad in our terms so that we can get specific when it's time to do the work. So this is a visual representation, or an attempt at some visual representation for our visual processors that many of you have seen. And it's our way of trying to kind of visually map out the interplay of some of the ideas and realities and terms that I just mentioned. So the idea that there are multiple phases, there's being aware that there's a problem to work on and agreeing that it's a priority. There's understanding why the problem is happening and how it's showing up in us as individuals, or maybe in our department. There's transforming, actively investing in changing behavior, in seeing numbers move, measuring your success, giving time and space to do so. And then hopefully you sustain your change. But we know that this is an iterative process, and sometimes new things come up and we have to go back to the beginning. And we are clear that these things happen on multiple levels. At WashU, we have staff, student, faculty, and even within that, we have tenure, non-tenure, we have grad, postdoc, undergrad, we have all different sorts of individuals and individual groups. And we all exist inside our institution, some of us on campuses and departments, different slices of the university. And it's clear that we exist in a larger culture that is moving around us, that we have little control over. And that could be the city of St. Louis, that could be our region, that could be the state of Missouri, that could be the United States, et cetera. And what's important about this is to notice where you could have a department or a unit or a group that's doing transformative work specifically around a set of topics. And you can have individuals in different representation groups that haven't not yet built awareness that it's a problem and a priority. And then you could have something happen in the culture that makes that work even harder. So again, trying to visually kind of see how all of these different levels of work and types of experiences and different terms kind of overlay on top of each other. Theoretically, you could say that diversity is kind of more like awareness, inclusion gets more into understanding, and that when you're talking about equity, you're talking about transforming. And if you're talking about liberation or justice, you're talking about sustaining. For the non-visual processors, this is just a text-based kind of way of saying a little bit of what I just said, that our theory of change in the academy as a department, if we are to be the university's primary vehicle for shifting culture and climate on all the campuses with a focus on staff and faculty, we have to embrace the structural realities and the diversity of our institution. We have to focus on impact, on the ability for individuals to be that change where they are, where they live, where they are experts inside our institutions. We need to illustrate an understanding of how our collective work is different, but connected and is also iterative. We have to center basic tenets of a healthy and vibrant community. So I remember having the values conversation with some folks from DSC and excited to see that go forward. If we don't have a shared set of values about how we want to be with and to each other, we'll have trouble doing specific work around DE&I. If we don't have transparency, if we don't have trust amongst each other, some of these basic things that need to exist in a healthy community are key table stakes for being able to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. We have to practice systemic awareness of what we might be missing. So knowing that we can jump to solve a problem, and if we haven't kind of looked at how that problem reverberates in other parts of our system or interconnected systems, that we could actually be making the problem worse or creating a new problem. And we have to focus on core capabilities that people can use and that can be portable from a learning session or a coaching session to an actual situation in our cubicles, and also resilient when things get hard and tricky and messy as the world is right now. So all that said, the question today was about structural racism, which is specific in two ways. One, that it's focused on race or ethnicity, and second, that it would be addressing structural impacts. So if you may have heard in the things I just shared, our focus, the Academy's focus by definition, is on systemic and sustainable shifts. So that's how we're organized, as well as a commitment to the myriad of ways in which inequities can materialize in disproportionate outcomes and experiences by identity, including but not limited to race. And that the manifestation of those disparate experiences may vary widely based on where in the university someone might be. So through that lens, I will walk you through some of the initiatives that we're working on right now that will help us as an institution address structural racism. So some institutional initiatives that we are partnering or spearheading right now. I think the big one in terms of transformative change is the Equity and Inclusion Council that was recently launched. We've had their first meeting this October. That is a project that Hank and I have been talking about at least a year, because what became clear as we started to work with units and departments was that they might have their own initiative inside the department, but they needed to match it up and sometimes needed like the back of having some institutional initiatives that were not so much top down, but at least institutionally visible and committed to. So we've been talking about what sort of body of people might be a good structure to be an ongoing concern that continuing over time can kind of be that conduit between what's happening in different units and departments and schools across the institution and what is being asked or prioritized at the leadership level. So that is the goal of the Equity and Inclusion Council. And I'm going to put in the chat, you can visit that website, and there's a ton of background information, the structure, et cetera. I will note that we did a dance between making enough decisions to get it up and running and letting the council actually sort of shape itself. So the first act of the council is really to do that shaping of itself. We didn't want 5, 6, 10, I mean, this is how it usually happens, right? 5, 6, 10 people get in a room and decide some things. We really wanted a broad cross-section of people from different backgrounds and experiences in the university to decide how that council is going to operate. So that's its first charge. So the other thing that we do that is institutional is we work with units and departments as the academy in direct partnerships. A lot of what we do there is help them get at those sort of why D&I is important to their part of the corner of the school. We help them define what the problem is so that sometimes there'll be an incident or a set of incidents. And so we try to get to the root cause of what's causing that and help set some goals and strategies to shift things over time in a measurable way. We talk a lot about problem definition and kind of understanding what individual acts or things are happening, but how is that supported by policy or procedures within a department or a unit. And we also help them identify and articulate gaps between experience and their desired goals. So that's, we are working at any one time with between 15 and 20 different units and departments across the university. And I will also put here in the chat the link to the form if you have a unit or department that's interested in starting a conversation with us. We also do strategic support. So this summer, talking with the chancellor's office and Hank's office, talking with different, public affairs, times when folks want to partner or thought partner around diversity, equity, and inclusion and sort of long-term change. And there are also strategic partnerships that are ongoing and continuous with HR, with Office of the Provost, Adrian Davis's office, the Center for Diversity and Inclusion, which focuses on students, the medical school, DE&I offices, the Gephardt Institute, et cetera. So those are some of our institutional initiatives. And then the community and individual initiatives, so focusing a little bit more on the individual or group level. We do learning sessions, which you can find easily by going to Learn at Work and searching DE&I. Academy DEI. I'll paste that too. We have some coming up that are meant to be around not so much exactly the election, but definitely there around the election. I will post those in the chat as well. We're going to do those starting in a couple weeks and probably keep them every 3 weeks through the local elections next spring. We also do listening sessions. So some of the ways we'll get started with units and departments are to just have a host a set of listening sessions and start teasing out where their challenges and focuses need to be. We do facilitated conversations where maybe a leadership team is trying to identify some next steps. We support our affinity and shared interest groups. And we also support advisory and planning committees, for example, the Day of Dialogue Planning Committee, as well as the LGBTQ Advisory Committee, and the MLK Planning Committee, and a couple others. So those are some of the ways that we support individuals and therefore the community. You can also sign up to find out about lots of events happening on campus. We do a bi-weekly newsletter that goes out to anybody who signs up that will kind of point you toward other units and departments, as well as our events and our new events that come online to engage and work on these issues. So with that, I will open up to questions.
Thanks, Nicole. A couple of questions I'm seeing here is there a website where we can see who is on the Equity Inclusion Council?
Yes. If you go to that first website I shared, it has, I can paste it again in the chat, equityinclusion.wistl.edu. It has the full list.
Thanks.
Uh-huh.
This is the question, how can I, as an individual staff member, be more involved in this?
That's a great question. I would expect that one of the first things that the council will do is try to identify, there's a working group called Council Structure Working Group, and one of the first things it'll probably do is identify like what that feedback loop looks like. So I would look to the report that they'll put out by the December Board of Trustees meeting, and it'll probably articulate what that looks like. But that's one of the things we wanted the council to decide.
Another question is, what is the university doing to ensure equitable hiring at WashU?
So that is one of the issues that I think the chancellor identified, and I know I just had a conversation with Legail this morning, and they're working on some report out of initiatives that they already have. So they have a number of folks in HR who are focused on pipeline and building relationships to make sure that our pools are diverse. And I know that there's, I think in the next handful of months, going to be some reporting out of how that's gone. And I think there are actually some really good stories there. But also some things that we could do to move that along. And I think that'll be an issue that the council picks up as well.
Another question that I'm seeing here, I'll try to condense it down. This person's taken a lot of courses and workshops. They appreciate them. They're usually during their lunch hour or after work hours. Could be an HR question, I guess, too. Is it possible to take maybe a limited number of these other courses and things you're talking about? Or that's actually part of your day, like part of your regular paid day, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so definitely reach out to me, because all of hours that we offer are during the regular hours.
Mm-hmm.
I think there could be a question there about managers not like allowing people to take them during hours, if that's the question. And that is something that we have kind of flagged as a needed policy conversation or initiative or encouragement to managers to be clear that this is a priority. This is one of those things where having a top-down priority can be helpful to say, you know, this is a priority for all of us as a community, and make sure that people are supported in being able to take that time. We're also looking at having some of them recorded so that people can take them on their own time.
Those are all the questions that I see. All right, we will take you off the hot seat now. Thank you for all you do. You have to be incredibly busy right now. I've had many meetings with Nicole, and Nicole, you're awesome. You always follow up. You do a great job. So we really appreciate you.
I do not always follow up in a timely manner, but I try.
I didn't say timely. I said you follow up, right? Okay.
I do.
Thank you so much. Kelly, you want to go to our next presenter?
All right. Thanks again for your time, Nicole. Our final speaker for the afternoon is Jamie Kolker. For those of you who do not know Jamie, I'll tell you a little bit about him in a moment. But also, he is going to show us, for those who have not been on campus much recently. I have a pretend campus shot in my background at the moment, but I too haven't been there much. So it looks a little different than it does if you haven't been there since, say, March. He's going to give us a look at what it's like today and how all those spaces are being used by our students, faculty, and staff. So a little bit of background about Jamie. He's been an architect and planner for over 30 years, has been Washington University's Associate Vice Chancellor and University Architect since 2010. He's responsible for stewardship of the university's campuses, leadership of campus planning, and for the design and development of all capital projects. A main one that you're all familiar with would be our recently completed East End project, which somehow seems like a long time ago now. Prior to joining WashU, he was principal at Venturi, Scott Brown and Associates, Architects and Planners in Philadelphia, where he worked on a wide range of academic and civic projects throughout the world. He worked on projects at Dartmouth College, the University of California, Santa Barbara, and on a Frank Lloyd Wright building, among many others. Currently, he serves as a member of the Missouri Botanical Garden Visitor Center Steering Committee. And in 2018, he was named as a fellow of the American Institute of Architects, which is a distinction held by less than 3% of the Institute's members. A fun fact about Jamie, he has lived and worked in Finland, where he led design of a new parking garage at the Helsinki airport. So that's a little bit about Jamie, and now we'll let him show us some pretty pictures and see what's going on around campus. All yours.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, this is an interesting presentation because it's really a chance to show a lot of pretty pictures and try to put myself in the position of those of you who have not been on campus in many, many months, where it's, typically a daily or very frequent occasion to be on campus and experience the new things. And as Kelly said, the East End just opened about a year ago exactly, and we had a good semester run of seeing it in use, but wanted to really share the wide range of things that have been going on campus. I know we've had many town hall and conversations with many of you about planning for the fall, and it's sort of interesting now to really show you the fruits of all of the labor that so many of you have been a part of. And just to build a little bit on what Hank said earlier in this conversation, that we're fortunate that our campus is one that has, and we've had a beautiful fall as well in terms of the weather, that it's really one that has been designed both inside and outside to foster collaboration and interactions, both formal interactions and informal interactions. And really the priority of the time I've been on campus has been to create spaces that encourage collaboration, encourage conversation, encourage building community. And as Hank said, that's what's so interesting and challenging about the last 7 months has been how do we pivot, how do we shift and look at the spaces that we have both inside and outside and let them be adaptable and flexible to the condition that none of us could have predicted. And one of the successes, I would say, of our campus and our buildings and our spaces is it's actually been quite adaptable and flexible, as university architecture and campus architecture should be. I think it's proven that the somewhat generic quality of our buildings, many of them are over 100 years old and are used in ways that are different from how they were designed. And here's sort of a quick example of how over the past few months, we've used spaces in many ways that are quite different from how they have been envisioned. But one of the responsibilities of a university's physical spaces is to be able to flex. Maybe we couldn't have predicted how we have flexed and how we have pivoted, but I wanted to share some of those changes that have occurred on the campus, really for those of you who have not seen them, or for you have not maybe seen a classroom or seen the Kemper or seen different places on campus. Some of them are, mostly they're temporary, mostly they're reversible. In fact, they're probably all reversible to go back to some semblance of what life was like pre-COVID in terms of the type of spaces, but there are many lessons that we'll learn from this in terms of working from home, remote teaching, and a whole other set of issues that we really need some time to absorb and analyze and understand what the impact will be moving forward. So just really to, Hank set me up to go back to 1900 and just for a minute to remind ourselves, and for those of you who sort of don't know the original plan of the campus, it's one that is quite recognizable today with Brookings Quad, Some of the dark buildings are the ones that were built in 1900. The East End, as you see, was a front yard with no buildings in it. But it really is a series of outdoor rooms and quads. All of these diagonal lines and crossing lines are paths in the model of Cambridge or Oxford in terms of creating outdoor spaces that have the sky as a ceiling. So this notion of the preference for outdoor space and the physical distancing one can achieve outdoors has been, again, fortunate that we've been able to do that in the fall. Now that it's getting cooler, I think we have a lot to experience of what it will be like as the weather shifts on campus, and how we use our outdoor rooms when it's 9 degrees and snowy and icy, and to really see what that will be like. It's been very relatively pleasant in the fall, so we're going to see how our outdoor rooms serve us well in the winter. A whole set of physical changes and strategies about physical changes, and they really all go back to the physical distancing, the masking, which is underlying all of this, and barriers, especially when one is eating or when you're in close contact with one another. The plexiglass barriers you've seen throughout all aspects of interactions that you've at grocery stores and airports and other places where you're coming one-to-one facing one another. We have over 300 plexiglass panels. It's probably a higher number now, actually, as we've been through the fall, but keeping them clean, keeping them maintained, and locating them, as I say, primarily where you have face-to-face interaction with another, or where you're eating, where your mask comes off and you're eating. So those are where primarily those have been installed. A very broad and comprehensive signage strategy and campaign has occurred, and there are signs throughout campus, inside and outside, with the "because we're in this together," promoting your physical distancing, the wearing a mask, washing frequently, etc. All of the things you've all been hearing. But we have, thousands and thousands of signs throughout campus designating in and out entrances where required because of the population and the density of those going in and out of buildings. So the signage has been a very important part. The public affairs has really taken the lead of designing a campaign that would be that would bring us together and help share the information that's needed throughout campus. Many of you were a part of the analysis of classrooms on campus, and me and my team really looked at every classroom, and there were many different ways to analyze what the physical distancing and the impact it would be on the classroom density, and working closely with the registrar and academic planners to think about what our capacity really would be for the fall. And it's quite just the physical reality is very different, whether it's a small seminar room like Siegel or a large fixed seat auditorium like Steinberg. And we can get a density of here, anything from about 55% of density of occupancy with the social distancing in a classroom to something around 15% because of the fixed seats in Steinberg Auditorium. So our total on-campus in-person classroom capacity really is 25% or so from what it was the year before. We're about 3,500 seats for in-person learning on campus, down from the 13,000 for the previous year. The classrooms have been upgraded with audiovisual equipment that allows the audience or the students and the audience to participate interactively with microphones and camera coverage of the instructor. All of the classrooms have been analyzed for their airflow and the infiltration and the filtration that is required and necessary for dealing with COVID, and updated where necessary. And then also we've looked at where we have classrooms that are too tight or too congested to handle the flow of traffic of students, especially during class change size. And really where that's required, we've created one-way pathways and in and outdoors into the building in which those classrooms are located. So here's the beginning sort of the tour of how some of the spaces look. And you can see when you have a fixed seating in a classroom on the left, it's pretty easy to just mark with a sticker, sit here, but you can see the density. I mean, look at not every seat that could be occupied is occupied in the photo on the left, but it gives you a sense of the density in the classrooms. And on the right, a little bit more flexibility where the furniture is able to be moved, and the seating designated with just the blue square, but you have more flexibility when the furniture can be reconfigured in a way that provides the distance that's required. So really, we have a wide range of classroom types. Other auditoria, we have markers on the seats that show where you can sit and where you can't sit. So really, you can see the density of the green markers on the seating on the left and on the upper right. And then spaces like Brown Lounge, also with markings on the floor that show where movable chairs are to maintain the minimum of 6 feet distance between one another for a class or another interaction. Hand sanitizers and wipes, I should have mentioned, also are provided at every classroom as well, and multiple locations on campus. On the left, you see sort of the typical maximum density of a stepped auditorium seating. And on the right, even the classes that occur within the Kemper, maintaining the physical distancing, but making the Kemper, since we don't have visitors allowed on campus, but the Kemper is a big part of a lot of instruction and how students can participate in seeing the work of the Kemper, but maintaining the social distancing that's required to have the interaction with the artwork be a part of their curriculum. Interesting also, the lobby, different spaces are used in different ways. So the lobby of the Kemper is used for a class, bringing the art there to be the subject of the discussion. Laboratories, many of you have been involved with the reconfiguring and the protocols around laboratories opening up for different kinds of research, which has been a staged incremental effort. And then even architecture studios, the reality is you're wearing a mask, you're maintaining your physical distancing, dividers are put up where required, and then different shifts of use of the studios so that the density can be maintained, but the maximum number of students have a chance to have an interaction in their studio space with their instructor. Cubbies are one of the big, this was something that we had a hunch and a theory that these would be required. With the library seating primarily being closed because of the risks associated. Most of our seating in the library is adjacent to the stacks, and the risks associated with that interaction meant that many, many seats in the library would not be available for studying. And having seating available or a place to take a Zoom class or a meal, or just have quiet study or less quiet study, these formerly known as pods, which are now cubbies, are throughout campus. They're in a variety of spaces. You can see one in Malacrot on the right, in the Graham Chapel, in Wrighton Hall. So a whole set of spaces that aren't used in their original ways have been repurposed temporarily to accommodate the cubbies. Now the cubbies haven't been getting maybe as much use as we predicted as best we could, but we think with the colder weather, there will be more need, and with the ramp up of the semester, we're tracking very carefully the density and use of the cubbies, and we'll analyze that incrementally to make sure we have the right cubbies in the right space with the right access to them. We have over 1,200 cubbies throughout campus in a whole different types of locations. Some are large spaces, some are smaller spaces. They have Wi-Fi, they have power, they have the sort of U-shaped acoustic panels. And one of the things that we've done, we've determined that some spaces are for quiet study, for quiet cubby use, and other spaces are for more, feeling comfortable to have an interaction with your computer, with your laptop, if you're in a class where participation is encouraged. So these are throughout campus, many spaces, both inside and in the new tents that are added. So looking at our overall campus, and this is sort of a keyed drawing or key aerial that shows the different kinds of strategies that we've used throughout campus to increase and expand the seating and other capabilities of our campus. And it's a mix of different things. There are 3 large tents, the pink rectangles, one in the East End, large one on Mud Field, and another one on the Swamp in the South 40. Those tents are currently used for cubbies, and we think that we'll need those cubbies, but we're also thinking about other uses that could be accommodated in these tents as the semester and the spring semester evolve. Those are fully air-conditioned, heated, card-controlled, light, Wi-Fi, power. So I'll show you some pictures of those if you haven't had a chance to peek in. There are a lot of spaces to expand the dining seating, since the dining capacities of many of the places where you would pick up your grab and go or pick up your food and go to eat, we've expanded both the outdoor dining and then, as I say, determined that some of the cubbies can be used for indoor dining or indoor dining at lunch primarily. And then we also have a whole series of exterior seating and exterior tents without walls or with limited walls that create places to gather in a physically distanced way, meeting the limits of the exterior gathering that have been determined by public health guidance, but creating tents throughout campus where incidental interactions between faculty and students or other kinds of conversations can happen. And I'll show you a picture of how some of those have been used over the semester. So the chairs, we had what we think was a great precedent on the East End last fall and over the summer of the chairs that were added throughout the East End. And we built on that precedent and added over 600 additional chairs to the Hilltop and to the South 40. And we've moved them around a little bit, gotten feedback where they were getting too dense and where they were getting too occupied and too encouraging for people to get close to one another. So those are easy enough to shift around as best we can, but it's really adding another layer of a way to experience and take advantage of the distance, the fresh air, and the outdoor space that we have. Again, we'll see how those serve us over the winter and the colder weather. These are the tents. These are arts and sciences in particular tents that are, I think there are 12 or so around campus of these. And you can see the uses of them are similar to what's in the photograph on the right. These are reservable via arts and sciences for arts and sciences use. Engineering, McKelvey School also has a couple of tents in their area of campus as well. So these are the aerial photographs of the three large tents. And here on the left is the tent right in the middle of Tisch Park and Mudfield and the East End. The upper one is the Mudfield tent with, to the right is a smaller tent, which is our surveillance testing that was talked about earlier for the student surveillance testing. And then the other tent is really taking up much of the swamp on the South 40. So, you know, our beautiful landscape spaces have been able to flex to accommodate these temporary buildings, really. I mean, they're tents, but they really are temporary buildings and serve the needs, especially as we go into winter. And the interior of the tents looks like this. You can see the mechanical systems, the heating and air conditioning, the ductwork in the ceiling, the lighting, the power on the floor, and then how the students are using them. They're coming in, they're reserving the space. It's all reservable in time increments and with certain rules and regulations about the use of them, with monitors that are sort of keeping up with making sure they're used in the appropriate ways and reconciling any or dealing with any conflicts about use of the cubbies. But you can see how they're used on the right. Typical, they haven't gotten super crowded yet, but again, we'll see how that evolves over the rest of the semester. Dining services has really gone through a reimagining of how their food is both served and where one eats. You can see on the right, there are hospitality coordinators stationed at each dining area to help answer questions, guide you if you have a question about where to get your food, where to eat, et cetera, really offering that point of welcome to each dining location. The serveries are outfitted with the plexiglass shields where required, and then again, encouraging outdoor dining primarily alone or because your mask is coming down, so maintaining the distances or eating together with somebody with whom you live. So those are there's definitely regulations and guidelines about how you should eat, even if outside with others. And really it was nice to see how the East End and how around Chinook Pavilion that people really took to the outdoor benches, the umbrellas, and the outdoor seating and followed the rules often for masking. I wonder how these two on the right are eating their meals, but I guess the masks will come off and they will enjoy what's in their boxes. But it just sort of gives you a sense of the, you know, we're making it work with the guidelines and with the messaging and reminding people how to make the most of our campus given the constraints and given the guidelines that we're following. Summers Recreation Center was one that wasn't open at the beginning of the semester, but as things changed, it did open up for limited use by students, and socially, physically distant exercise equipment, repurposing things like the track to have equipment on it, and really just spreading out within the recreation center floor itself. And then even the basketball courts are where the exercise bikes are now spread out, and spinning rather than in the spinning room would happen more in a class room setting that was the former or the typically used basketball courts. So really, again, as I say, the flexibility and adaptability of our spaces has been pretty incredible of how we have been able to flex. Some of the public spaces, the Clark Fox Forum, the atrium in Knight Bower, and using our furniture, spreading it out, making it single seating, and really giving people the opportunity to study and have some sense of being around people, and going to a place if you don't have the time between classes to take an hour or two to study or Zoom. Olin Library and Whispers, there is a portion of Olin Library that is open as a cubby location on the right. That's sort of the southwest corner of Olin Library, with the same cubby furniture, power, Wi-Fi, etc., that we have throughout campus. And on the left is Whispers, which is also cubbies, but cubbies that are also where you can have your meal that you've picked up the grab and go from Whispers. This is one of the most popular cubby locations. I mean, it's the center of campus, it's the library, and but it's also done in a way that maintains the safety of the collections and the staff that are working in the library, and opening up much of the ground floor to cubby student use. So I think just in closing, I want to say that I hope this has given you a sense that despite the challenges, despite the changes of density, the masking, the signage, we still have a remarkably collaborative and community-built campus. And it's so nice and sort of reassuring to walk through campus these days and see how people are interacting in their way, or enjoying the air, skateboarding, enjoying the Brookings steps. I mean, we still are WashU, we still are the Danforth campus, and making the most of what we can. And I think we're fortunate to have such a beautiful set of spaces, both inside and outside, that make that possible. And even earlier this fall, enjoying the grass, enjoying studying outside, getting a drink and sitting outside, not with a lot of people nearby, but really sharing the access to our outdoor space. And going back and forth, talking with your friends, etc. It's still an active, thriving campus, albeit very different than we ever could have imagined. I think that is it. So happy to answer any questions or take comments.
Great, thank you, Jamie. I go to campus 1 to 2 times per week, but I usually go to do what I'm going to do and leave. I don't look around too much, so it's nice to be able to see what's going on campus for sure. A few questions that came through. Are there any limitations on which students can use cubbies?
Which students? I don't believe there are limitations on which students, but the policies are all online, but I don't think there are limitations, but they are reserved for students.
Another question that, interesting actually, this must have been a pretty large financial investment on the part of WashU. Does the usage, or maybe lack thereof right now, kind of justify the expenses at this time? Or do you think that's going to show more as it gets cooler outside and people begin to go into these new spaces?
Yeah, I mean, the relative cost of the cubbies, and that we know that in the wintertime we're going to need the tents, the 3 tents, just because of the limit of indoor spaces, and whether they're used for contingency planning for excess dining capacity or more cubby demand. I think we will see likely evolution of how the furniture is laid out in the cubbies based on the actual data that we'll be collecting. So I think the relative cost of the furniture, all the chairs are reused. We're going to reuse all this furniture when it's done. The outdoor seating we're going to continue to use on our campus. So I think it gives us that extra capacity that we've needed on campus that we just didn't have in the spaces that we had. So sort of expanding our campus by adding additional spaces.
Yeah. Whenever you create these spaces, is there any analysis looking at the airflow around them? For example, the cubbies?
Yeah, absolutely. So all of the design of these spaces was done in consultation with our public health leaders from the School of Medicine and from the Habif Center. So every sort of physical change has been reviewed, whether it's the distances, whether it's the airflow, whether it's the filtration, whether it's the opportunities for congestion or face-to-face interaction, has been very much determined and guided by the public health principles that have been guiding all of these decisions on campus.
Thanks. As things begin to open back up, whenever that may be, will there be any further modifications? For example, if we have existing cubicles where we're coming back, but we still want to try to maintain our distance, will there be any further modifications?
So we're just kicking off planning for spring, and so as Hank said, we'll probably be more or less like we were in fall. But I think there are a lot of open questions about what life will be like and what people's comfort will be like at whatever moment things really are changing or going back to some sense of normal, and what open office space will be like, how the carols in the library will be used. So I think we have, we're all keeping up with this, with reading about the best practices and learning about the public health guidelines. And I think we're just going to continue to look incrementally at how we plan for the future. This is for a campus planner, for me, this is an interesting moment because there's only so much planning you can do other than building in a lot of flexibility and a lot of adaptability. And that as a tenet of the planning, there's no way anybody right now, can say this is the way it should be in X number of months. One can't.
Another question was, are the garages being used for classrooms? Somebody said, I know the West Campus garage is being used by True Fusion, for example.
Yeah, West Campus Garage is being used by True Fusion for classes. We looked at it and we thought about it, but given the ability to have the tents be heated, we thought that using the garages for such a limited window of opportunity was not the most efficient way, and decided therefore to use the tents rather than the garages.
Somebody said, hello and thank you. What are the longer term plans for collaborative office spaces like West Campus? Will those be reconverted back to more traditional spaces?
It sort of goes back to I think we're trying to figure it out and thinking about it and absorbing and learning and reading and trying to follow the literature on how people are planning space. I think we need some time to absorb and think about how space is planned. It's always going to be a mix of closed, for so many of the past 10 or 20 years, there's been a movement towards open office workspaces and all of that. And there are still ways to provide physical distancing in an open workspace environment. So we have a mix, but I don't have an answer to that right now, but we have a lot to learn.
Other question that came up that I think maybe Richard answered. Richard has been doing a good job of answering questions for me in the Q&A. This isn't really about the spaces, but what construction is going on the East End right now, where they have like all blocked off?
So there are a couple of things. There's the completion of McKelvey Hall. So construction did not stop in St. Louis during even in April and the spring. So that's the completion of McKelvey Hall for computer science, and that will be done at the end of this year, opening in early 2021. So that's the building on the north side. And then in the center is the completion of the ring road that will be the drop off of Brookings Drive, as well as some underground water detention and retention and cistern work that will be covered up and you won't know that it's there, but it's an opportunity as we're completing the surface of the East End to do some of the underground work as well. So really by the end of, in the coming months, and certainly by early 2021, it will be complete out there, and you'll get a sense of, it'll be the winter, but you get a sense of what that connection at the East will look like.
Great, thank you. And you are off the hot seat. I don't see any more questions for you. Thank you so much for your presentation, and the pictures. Really, they speak volumes for all the work that's been done, especially for somebody like myself that doesn't really see that very often. So thank you.
Thanks to all of you, many of you had a part in it.
So that's the end of our town hall. Thank you all for attending. I will say as a note, this town hall has been recorded and we will post it on the Danforth Staff Council website in the coming days. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to email us at staffcouncil@woostel.edu. Thank you again for attending today, and get outside and enjoy this lovely weather we're having right now. And I'll pause for you all to laugh, and you all take care. Thank you so much.